A desperate plea. In the grand halls of the Galactic Council, representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered, their faces etched with worry. An ancient threat had awoken, a world-devouring entity that defied all conventional weapons. The Council's most advanced warships, armed with technologies beyond human comprehension, had proven useless against this foe. As the assembly spoke in hushed tones, a junior counselor, Zafir of the Viridian Consortium, stood to address the gathering. "Esteemed colleagues," Zafir began, his voice trembling slightly, "I believe there may be one hope left to us. A world we quarantined long ago, a species we deemed too volatile, too unpredictable to join our ranks." Murmurs of disbelief spread through the hall. The species Zafir spoke of was well known, but few dared speak their name aloud. "You speak of Earth," the Council's leader, a tall, ethereal being named Xander, said. "The humans. You would have us break the quarantine and seek their aid." Zafir nodded. "I know it seems impossible, but the humans have a way of doing the impossible. Their weapons, their tactics, their very way of thinking. It's unlike anything the entity has faced before. If anyone can find a way to stop this menace, it's them." The debate raged for hours, but in the end, the Council voted to contact Earth. They had no choice. The entity, which they called the Void, had already consumed a dozen worlds and showed no signs of stopping. Earth, with its strange and terrible weapons, offered a glimmer of hope in an increasingly dark galaxy. As the Council prepared to send a message to Earth, Xander stood before the assembly. "We do this not because we trust the humans, but because we have no other option. May the stars guide us in this desperate hour." Light years away, on a blue and green world, the people of Earth slept, unaware that the fate of the galaxy would soon rest in their hands. Breaking the quarantine. Admiral Ilara Voss stood on the bridge of Earth's orbital defense station, her eyes fixed on the view screen. A sleek, silver ship hung in space before her, a design unlike anything she had seen before. For 3 centuries, no alien vessel had approached Earth. The quarantine had held, an impenetrable barrier that kept humanity isolated from the rest of the galaxy. But now, it seemed, the quarantine had been broken. "Hail them," Admiral Voss ordered, her voice calm and steady. A moment later, the view screen flickered to life, revealing a face that was at once alien and familiar. It was Xander, leader of the Galactic Council. "Admiral Voss," Xander said, inclining their head in greeting, "I bring grave news. The galaxy is under attack by an entity we cannot stop. We need your help." Voss raised an eyebrow. "You quarantined us for 300 years, and now you want our help. Why should we trust you?" Xander's expression was grim. "Because if you don't, the Void will consume us all. Your weapons, your ships, they're unlike anything we've seen before. We believe they may be the key to stopping this threat." The bridge was silent for a long moment. Then Admiral Voss nodded. "We'll need more information about this entity, and we'll need assurances that the quarantine will be lifted once the threat is dealt with." "Of course," Xander said. "We'll provide you with all the data we have, and you have my word that Earth will be welcomed into the galactic community once this crisis is over." As the communication ended, Admiral Voss turned to her crew. "Prepare the EBS Titan for launch. If it's a fight the galaxy wants, it's a fight they'll get." Deep in the heart of Earth's most secure military base, a ship unlike any other was being prepared for war. The EBS Titan, a marvel of human ingenuity and determination, was about to face its greatest challenge, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. The EBS Titan launches. Captain Nora Vance stood on the bridge of the EBS Titan, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The ship was a marvel of human engineering, a testament to the ingenuity and determination of a species that had been cut off from the rest of the galaxy for 300 years. At over 2 kilometers long, the Titan was the largest ship Earth had ever built. Its hull was a patchwork of alloys and composites, each one designed to withstand the rigors of combat in the void of space. Along its flanks, an array of kinetic cannons and missile launchers sat ready, their destructive power unmatched by any ship in the Galactic Council's fleet. But it was the Titan's main weapon that truly set it apart. A massive railgun capable of accelerating a tungsten slug to a significant fraction of the speed of light. It was a weapon of last resort, a final option when all other tactics have failed. As the Titan's crew made their final preparations, a group of alien observers watched from the rear of the bridge. They were Xander's representatives, sent to observe and assist in the mission. But as they watched the human crew work, their expressions ranged from awe to outright fear. Such primitive weapons, one of the observers muttered, his eyes wide as he watched a crew member load a massive shell into one of the kinetic cannons. How can they hope to defeat the Void with such crude tools? Captain Vance overheard the comment and smiled. Primitive, perhaps, she said, but effective. The Void won't know what hit it. As the final checks were completed, Captain Vance gave the order to launch. The Titan's engines roared to life, pushing the massive ship out of Earth's orbit and into the depths of space. On the bridge, the crew cheered as the stars streaked past the view screen. They knew the challenges that lay ahead. They knew the odds were stacked against them, but they also knew that they carried with them the hopes and dreams of an entire species, and they would not let them down. As the Titan set course for the last known location of the Void, Captain Vance stood tall, her eyes fixed on the view screen. "This is it," she said, her voice steady. "Let's show the galaxy what humanity is capable of." First contact. The EVS Titan emerged from warp space into a scene of utter devastation. Where once a thriving star system had existed, now there was only darkness. Planets, once teeming with life, were now lifeless husks, their surfaces scoured clean by the insatiable hunger of the Void. On the bridge of the Titan, Captain Vance and her crew stared in horror at the scene before them. The Void, a massive, amorphous entity of pure darkness, hung in space like a malevolent god. Around it, the shattered remnants of the Galactic Council's fleet drifted, their once mighty ships reduced to little more than scrap metal. "My God," whispered one of the alien observers, his face pale. "We're too late." But Captain Vance shook her head. "No," she said, her voice firm. "We're not. Helm, bring us in closer. Weapons, prepare to fire on my command." As the Titan moved towards the Void, the entity seemed to sense their approach. Tendrils of darkness lashed out towards the ship, probing for weaknesses in its defenses. But the Titan's shields held firm, and the ship continued its advance. "Fire," Captain Vance ordered, and the Titan's weapons roared to life. Kinetic rounds and missiles streaked towards the Void, impacting against its inky surface with tremendous force. For a moment, it seemed as though the entity might be defeated. But then, the Void began to change. Its surface rippled and shifted, and the weapons that had once seemed so effective now passed harmlessly through its form. The entity had adapted, just as the Galactic Council had warned. On the bridge, Captain Vance gritted her teeth. "It's absorbing our weapons," she said. "We need to try something else. Helm, bring us around for another pass. Weapons, load the railgun." The Titan swung around, its railgun charging with an ominous hum. As the ship approached the Void once more, Captain Vance gave the order to fire. The railgun roared, and a massive tungsten slug shot towards the entity at impossible speeds. The impact was titanic. The Void reeled back, its form rippling and distorting under the force of the blow. For a moment, it seemed as though the entity might be defeated. But then, it began to adapt once more, its surface shifting and changing to absorb the energy of the impact. On the bridge, Captain Vance slammed her fist against the armrest of her chair. "Damn it," she said. "We need to find a way to hurt this thing." But as the Titan prepared for another pass, the Void lashed out with renewed fury. Tendrils of darkness slammed into the ship's shields, draining them of power. Consoles sparked and flickered, and the bridge was plunged into darkness. Shields down to 20%, reported the tactical officer, his face grim. We can't take another hit like that. Captain Vance closed her eyes for a moment, her mind racing. They had come so far, fought so hard. They couldn't give up now. But what could they do against an enemy that seemed to adapt to their every move? And then, an idea began to form in her mind. It was risky, perhaps even suicidal, but it might just be their only chance. "Helm," she said, her voice steady. "Bring us in close to the void. As close as you can get." The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances, but they obeyed. The Titan moved towards the void, its shield straining under the onslaught of the entity's attacks. But still, the ship pressed on. "Weapons," Captain Vance said, her eyes fixed on the view screen. "Prepare to fire everything we have." "On my mark." The Titan shuddered as it approached the void, its hull groaning under the strain. But still, Captain Vance held her ground. And then, at the last possible moment, she gave the order. "Fire." Adapting to the enemy. The Titan unleashed a barrage of firepower unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Kinetic rounds, missiles, and exotic munitions poured from the ship's weapons arrays, slamming into the void with devastating force. For a moment, the entity reeled back, its form rippling and distorting under the onslaught. But even as the Titan's crew cheered, the void began to adapt. Its surface shifted and changed, becoming harder, more resilient. The weapons that had once seemed so effective now bounced harmlessly off its inky hide. "It's not working," said the tactical officer, his voice tight with fear. "Our weapons are useless." Captain Vance gritted her teeth. "Not all of them," she said. "Ready the Nova bomb." A hush fell over the bridge. The Nova bomb was the Titan's most powerful weapon, a fusion device capable of vaporizing an entire planet. It was a weapon of last resort, a final option when all other tactics had failed. But against the void, even the Nova bomb seemed like a futile gesture. Still, they had to try. "Nova bomb ready," reported the weapons officer, her face grim. "Fire," Captain Vance ordered. The Nova bomb streaked towards the void, a blinding lance of light in the darkness of space. It detonated with a force that shook the Titan to its core, engulfing the entity in a massive fireball. For a moment, the void disappeared from the view screen, obscured by the blinding light of the explosion. But then, as the flames cleared, the entity emerged once more, its form battered but unbroken. "No effect," reported the tactical officer, his voice hollow. On the bridge, a sense of despair began to settle over the crew. They had thrown everything they had at the void, and still it remained, implacable and undefeated. But then, something strange began to happen. The void, which had once seemed like a single monolithic entity, began to break apart. Smaller swarms of darkness peeled away from the main mass, darting and weaving through space like a swarm of angry bees. "It's adapting," said the science officer, her eyes wide with realization. "It's breaking apart to make itself harder to hit." Captain Vance nodded, her mind racing. "Then we need to adapt too," she said. "Helm, bring us in close to one of those swarms. Weapons, ready the point defense lasers." The Titan swung towards one of the smaller swarms, its point defense lasers tracking the darting shapes with computer-assisted precision. The lasers fired, and the swarm exploded into a cloud of inky particles. "It worked," cheered the weapons officer, pumping her fist in the air. But even as the crew celebrated, more swarms began to peel away from the void, each one adapting to the Titan's tactics in a different way. Some became faster, more agile, while others became denser, harder to destroy. "We can't keep this up forever," said Captain Vance, her brow furrowed with concentration. "We need to find a way to stop this thing at its source." And then, as if in answer to her words, the science officer let out a gasp of realization. "I think I know what this thing is," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "It's not just a mindless entity. It's a weapon, an ancient A-driven weapon." The bridge fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. If the void was a weapon, then that meant it had a weakness, a way to defeat it. Find that weakness, Captain Vance ordered, her voice firm. And find it fast. We're running out of time. As the Titan continued its desperate battle against the void, the crew worked frantically to unravel the secrets of the ancient weapon. They analyzed its movements, its behavior, searching for any clue that might lead them to victory. And all the while, the void grew stronger, its swarms more numerous and more deadly. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and the crew of the Titan knew that they were the only ones who could stop it. They had to find a way. They had to adapt, or the void would consume them all. Cracking the code. Lieutenant Kai Evayemi sat hunched over his console, his eyes darting across the screens in front of him. As the Titan's AI expert, it was his job to unravel the secrets of the void, to find the weakness that would allow them to defeat it once and for all. For hours, he had been analyzing the entity's behavior, searching for patterns, for clues. And now, finally, he thought he had found something. "Captain," he said, his voice tight with excitement, "I think I know how to stop this thing." On the view screen, the void loomed large, its swarms still darting and weaving through space. But Kay's attention was focused on the data scrolling across his screens, on the complex algorithms and subroutines that made up the entity's core programming. "The void is a hive mind," he said, his fingers flying across the keys. "Each swarm is connected to the others, sharing data, adapting to new threats. But there's a weakness in their communication network, a vulnerability we can exploit." Captain Vance leaned forward in her chair, her eyes intense. "What do you need?" she asked. "I need to disrupt their network," Kai said. "If we can jam their signals, overload their systems with EM pulses, we might be able to cause a cascading failure. Make the whole thing come crashing down." The captain nodded. "Do it," she said. Kai worked frantically, his mind racing as he coded the Titan's systems to emit a series of synchronized EM pulses. It was a delicate dance, a precise sequence of signals that had to be timed just right. But even as he worked, the void seemed to sense the danger. Its swarms began to move faster, more erratically, as if trying to evade the coming attack. "They're adapting," warned the tactical officer, his voice tight with fear. "Not fast enough," said Kai, his fingers flying across the keys. "I've got them now." With a final keystroke, he sent the signal. The Titan's systems pulsed with energy, sending out a cascading series of EM bursts that slammed into the void like a tidal wave. For a moment, nothing happened. The swarms continued their dance. The void continued its inexorable advance. But then, something began to change. The swarms faltered, their movements becoming erratic, disjointed. The void itself seemed to shudder, its form rippling and distorting as if in pain. "It's working," cried the science officer, her eyes wide with amazement. And then, with a final, convulsive shudder, the void began to come apart. Its swarms dissolved into clouds of inky particles, its core structure shattering the swarm. As the EM pulses ripped through the void, the entity began to come apart at the seams. Its swarms dissolved into clouds of inky particles, its core structure collapsing under the weight of the Titan's attack. On the bridge, the crew watched in stunned silence as the void disappeared from the view screen, its once terrible form reduced to nothing more than a haze of drifting particles. "We did it," whispered the weapons officer, her voice trembling with relief. But even as the crew began to celebrate, Captain Vance held up a hand for silence. "It's not over yet," she said, her eyes fixed on the view screen. "Look." On the screen, the particles of the void were beginning to drift back together, slowly at first, then faster and faster. It was as if the entity was trying to reform itself, to pull itself back from the brink of oblivion. "It's adapting," said Kai, his face grim. "Trying to repair the damage." Captain Vance nodded. "Then we hit it again," she said. "And again, until there's nothing left to adapt." The Titan swung back towards the remains of the void, its weapons charging with an ominous hum. Again and again, the ship fired its EM pulses, each one tearing through the entity like a knife through flesh. And with each pulse, the void grew weaker, its attempts to reform becoming more and more feeble. Until, at last, the final pulse tore through its core, shattering it into a million pieces. On the view screen, the last remnants of the void drifted apart, their once terrible power now nothing more than a memory. And on the bridge of the Titan, the crew erupted into cheers of joy and relief. They had done it. Against all odds, they had defeated the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. And they had done it not with the advanced technologies of the Galactic Council, but with the ingenuity and determination of the human spirit. As the Titan turned back towards Earth, its mission complete, Captain Vance stood tall on the bridge, her eyes shining with pride. "We did it," she said, her voice ringing out across the room. "We showed the galaxy what humanity is capable of." And in that moment, as the crew of the Titan celebrated their victory, a new era dawned for the people of Earth. An era of exploration, of discovery, of taking their rightful place among the stars. For 300 years, they had been isolated, cut off from the rest of the galaxy. But now, thanks to the bravery and skill of the Titan and her crew, that isolation was at an end. Earth would never be the same again. And neither would the galaxy. For the people of Earth had proven themselves to be more than just a primitive, warlike species. They had proven themselves to be heroes, defenders of the innocent, protectors of the weak. And as the Titan sailed through the stars, its crew ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, one thing was certain: the galaxy would never forget the name of Earth or the bravery of those who called it home. The end.